What's up, LEGO builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for another week of building the Battle of Coruscant in LEGO. This week is going to be pretty much all about skyscrapers again, but good stuff. I'm going to be adding in some windows for the first time into my skyscraper design, as well as kind of breaking down what my vision and what my plan is for these skyscrapers on Coruscant. I realized I kind of put the cart before the horse, where I started building these skyscrapers without really telling you guys or telling myself kind of what my plan is for like the proportions of them, the size, where they're going to be, like how they're going to fit into this MOC. So we're going to be discussing that more in this episode, as well as adding in some more visual texture and adding in some electric wire on the clone base walls. I've got some good stuff for you guys this week. So let's get started. I'm kicking off this week with some work on the base wall. I want to get the correct color of clip and jumper plate added to the electric wire and finish running the pipes along this wall. It will be nice to see the whole thing finished and to know if this was the right technique to use for this electric wire. The corner of the wall gave me some trouble. As you can see, the pipe did not want to follow that 90-degree turn and kept popping out of the clips and bending in weird ways. And I just couldn't get the curve in the pipe to look the way I wanted it to. I will have to do some trimming on one of the pipe pieces, but that will be the only one. And I only took a little bit off, so I don't think it'll hurt the pipe's usefulness in future projects. While I'm over here, I'm also going to tile off some of the base floor. I have been holding off finishing the whole thing because I don't think I have enough parts for it, and because it's a low priority, so I don't want to spend money getting those tiles that could be used for things that will help the series progress better, like the skyscrapers. Plus, I can finish off the ground here whenever. So I've got some cool stuff to show you guys over here, but first I want to show you how the electric wire along the top of the wall turned out. I'm pretty happy with how it looks for the most part. I was able to get all of the tiling in underneath the wires as well. The only part I'm not super satisfied with is this corner. Because this pipe is clipped in right here and right here, it causes a lot of stress and tension at this corner and causes it to bend weird. I was hoping for a much looser curve right here, something that would come all the way out to the corner of the wall and then loop over this way, but it doesn't look terrible, and that's something I can play with later. I am happy to have all of the walls of the base finished. That's another thing I can check off the list. Now, on to the good stuff. You can see I've got something exciting popping up over there. But first, I put in another little section of vents. I just want to put all kinds of like random vents and things sprinkled throughout this area. I've already talked about how I'm going to do that and why. I really like the way Slipstream described this as visual texture, and that's basically what I'm going for. So that's why instead of just placing these vents directly on the roof, I put a little raised area that has a little pop out on either side and then put the vents on top of that. I was also working on another design variation for the skyscraper. So now I have these pieces that can stick on the front, as well as these larger round pieces, and it changes up the look of the skyscraper quite a bit, which makes me really excited, because now I can just start to replicate this base shape. And once those are built and put in place, then I can add in the modification pieces and change the look of the skyscraper. That way it isn't the same exact building over and over again. That being said, there will be buildings that will be of a completely different design, and that is what this baby is right here. So I found an image of this in a short that I was watching, and it looked like a cool building and one that was fairly easy to replicate. So this is the general frame that I've been playing with. This is obviously not the finished color or look. It's going to be much taller, but I think what I'm going to do is build these pillars right here that come down on a slope and then turn into just like a solid pillar right here that run all the way down to the ground. And then the sides of the building are just going to be plate like this on its side. This isn't how I'm going to be doing this technique. I just needed something to hold this plate up so you could get a good idea of like what the sides of this are going to look like. And then I'll tile those off. So basically, you know, it'll look something similar to this. What I need to figure out next for this building is how I'm going to get these plates to connect to the ground and then run up the entire length of the building. Right now I'm just using a couple of turntables, which allows me to, you know, put these plates at an angle like that. Problem is the turntables are very loose, so you can see there's a lot of wiggle room, and this thing isn't very tall, so you know, when it's like 2 feet tall, it's going to lean out pretty seriously like that, and there's just going to be huge gaps, which is a no-no. The other thing I need to figure out is how I'm going to put windows in this upper area. So this kind of where my hand is actually going to be open and hollow. I'll show you the picture again, and you can see there's like this hollow area, and then there's windows running along the sides, and then there's kind of like 4 angled pieces that meet at a point at the top of the building, and in each of those 4 sections there are some blue windows. So I got to figure out how to put some windows in here, but I'm very excited with how this looks overall. I think this is going to fit nicely in Coruscant, and this building's going to be massive. Like, I want it to be very, very tall. And then I also put a little antenna here on top. That's pretty much everything I have to update you guys on. It is time to get back to work on the skyscrapers. Now that I have my plan for the skyscrapers fleshed out better, I'm going to adjust the one I already built. I'm going to make it 8 studs taller and thicker by 1 brick. The reason I'm only adding 8 studs is because this is going to be one of the smaller skyscrapers, and it's sitting on a foundation that is already fairly tall. I wasn't looking forward to modding this build because I knew I'd have to tear up some of the internal sections of the build to add more plate and then make sure the new add-on is securely connected to the rest of the build, but it actually went pretty smoothly, and there won't be any weak or breaking point to worry about between the new add-on and the previously built section. Next, I want to add some windows. Windows have been an interesting problem for me, as none of these buildings are minifig scale, so I had to figure out a way to add them into the buildings without throwing off the scale or making the skyscraper look weird. I decided to try using some trans-clear cylinders from my previous Kato mock. I lined each side of the building with a row of cylinders, then added some black brick behind so you can't see through the cylinders into the empty husk of the building's interior. I also think using the cylinders adds a nice little bit of texture and detail, as now the windows look slightly rounded and ribbed instead of using just trans-clear brick and having a completely flat side running down the building. Here's a look at the Skyscraper 2.0. It's got some windows. So when I connected this skyscraper back to the foundation piece, I actually stuck some tile underneath the skyscraper. You can see it running along there, on the side, and then on the back. I did this because originally there was a little bit of a gap here, and I feel like it really separated the skyscraper from the foundation piece. So now that I have this tile in, it definitely looks more like one solid building instead of 2 disjointed sections. I'm definitely happy with how the modifications to the building look. So I added about that much height, and you can see running along the side are the trans-clear studs that represent windows. I did have some people suggest using trans blue for the city, and I had thought about that a little bit. The reason I didn't is because I was worried if I used trans blue it would look too much like Mandalore, because that's such I feel like that's such a classic Mandalore look, is the light bluish gray skyscrapers with the trans blue windows. I wanted this to look more like Coruscant, and you don't see a whole lot of blue windows, and I think this trans clear is a good color, which makes me super happy because, as you guys know, I have a ton of those left over from Kato Nemoidium, and it would be nice to be able to use those again in this mock. Now there are some things I don't like. I think maybe the building could be a little bit taller, and I would like it to be wider. The reason being is I don't want these buildings to look too out of proportion to the minifigures down on the street. Obviously, like I said, these are not going to be minifig scale buildings because that just wouldn't, I'd have to make sure this apartment was minifig scale. I'd have to make sure the base is it would just throw everything off, and I don't have the pieces or the size to do that. So basically what I'm trying to do is make this area as big as possible. And I feel like this building still looks kind of weird. Like if I have a minifigure, you can see if I have a minifigure right here, the building looks big, but then you think about the minifigure like going inside the building, it's like he wouldn't even have room to turn around really. So that's why I'm thinking about adding a second row of trans clear studs next to this one, basically making this building 2 bricks wide. I think that that extra width may help these buildings proportion to minifigures a little bit better. And as far as the height goes, I think I'll build the other skyscrapers first and then see how they look comparatively. That's the nice thing about this, is it's pretty much done and set there, so I technically don't need to I don't need to mess with it right now. I can move on to other stuff. And speaking of other stuff, I've got some cool things to show you. So first, this raised vent put in the roof, and then next to that I have a bunch of wires running across the roof, and then down the front of the building, down into the sidewalk, and then, down into the depths of Coruscant or whatever. I did this just to add some more visual texture and detail to the front of the building. Someone suggested some kind of like wires or cables, and I was like, you know what, that's a good idea. I'm sorry I forgot who the name was, but I do have a little 90-degree joint right here that allows the wires to come up here and then go across the roof. Originally, I was going to bend them, but that just didn't look really good, and it would have been harder to secure them in place. I also came across a big problem while tiling off this front wall, and that is, when I push on this, it causes the plate walls to kind of pop off and break. So I need to stick my hand into the building and then kind of push on these from behind. The issue with that is I put so many pillars in here, I now can't get to that front wall. And as a result, I have little sections like this that break, and I don't have a way to fix them or a way to continue putting more tiles and plate down. So I think what I'm gonna have to do is rip out a bunch of those pillars, hurry and finish plating all of this off, and then put them all back in. So that's something I wish I'd realized sooner. I thought I could kind of just tile this off as I went, but lesson learned. Now, I know last week I said I was going to start working on some of the battle damage in this area, but I'm pretty much out of time for this update. So I'm sorry if any of you guys were looking forward to that or excited for that. I will really try to get to it next week. I just got so fixated and hyped on the Skyscraper area, that's where most of my efforts went. All that being said, it's time to figure out what's going on next week. I feel like because I spent so much time on the Skyscrapers this week, I really need to spend more time on the clone base next week. So I do want to try and get that rubble, or try and get that battle damage section in on the base wall gates. And possibly I just might be starting to build one of the first vehicles that I'm going to need to construct for this mock. I won't say what it is. Let's just say it packs a punch. All that being said, that wraps up this video. Don't forget to let me know what you guys thought about this update down below in the comments, and I will catch you guys next time. But until then, happy building.